Hi, Kathy.
Hi, guys.
Kathy,
Sorry I have to be virtual again.
you're on mute.
What's that?
You're on
Mute.
mute.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
you need to fix me.
Okay, maybe we don't have the volume up.
Yeah.
Say something now.
Okay.
There we go.
There she is.
Oh, I hear myself. I was saying, I'm sorry that I have to be virtual again. I think that my meetings are going to be like this for a while still.
Sorry you have to be virtual too. Hope everything pans out okay.
Yeah. Well, Mama's healing well. She just needs the extra care, and I won't get into it because we're being recorded, and that's her personal stuff. But yeah, I'm going to be here for a while yet. So.
Okay, well, it is 5:30, so I'll go ahead and call our meeting here to order. This is Wednesday, December 7th, 2022, the Executive Committee meeting. And the first thing is just unfinished business to talk about the governance model for the board. One of the things I was wondering is, and I can't remember what the pillar was, but I was thinking that one of the pillars was, maybe you can help me with this.
Or you would have to ask that.
I know. Well, I was thinking one of the pillars, if I'm remembering, of the strategic plan was to something governance with the board or communications or something. So anyway, my thought is that this could be a strategic plan idea.
Well, I appreciate you surfacing because I was thinking the same thing. I think we need more time on this because I think it suggests, as we're looking our work forward,
Right.
how important we take this on and keep achievement as our
Right.
centerpiece. And
So what I was gonna suggest is that as we start to flush out that strategic plan, that is we sort of have a governance goals in there, and that we look at overall the governance, the function of the board, and look to see how this would play out if we did that.
Based on what the strategic plan is kind of,
Right.
yeah,
right,
okay.
some of our, our.
Well, and as we look to as we look at restructuring, right? And those roles and duties
Right.
may fall in line better with what is on this.
No, I was thinking the same thing, and I didn't get a chance to talk with Brett on Tuesday, but I will on Friday.
Okay.
Okay, too. Because I was thinking the same thing, because I've been trying to reread this book. I mean, I've read this thing numerous times, but in the past.
So what I was going to suggest is let's, there was no action anyway, but how about we just table this, not have a big discussion about it tonight, wrap it into our strategic plan as some goals to looking at our governance model.
Okay.
Thank you.
But there's a lot of room in there, but I was thinking the same thing, because it wasn't popping out at me, and yet we've had a lot of conversation.
Well, like for,
Feedback.
yeah,
Now
so-
you're talking about 88 to 94, right? That whole,
correct.
okay, yep.
Yeah, so what I'm thinking, like one of the pillars is stakeholder relationships, right? Which is a committee
The committee.
in here.
Right.
And
yeah.
another one being infrastructure and funding
Right.
is a committee in here. So I'm wondering that, I just think it makes sense
There might
to,
align here with the whole strategic planning in terms of where issues have been categorized almost.
right.
Okay.
Does that sound good?
Yeah,
Kathy?
I'm on
To you
board
too?
with that.
Okay.
It does. I think if we keep it on the agenda, it doesn't mean we have to talk about it every time. We can just say there's, no further,
Right.
information on it at this time, but just keep it there in case something does come down.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and then the next thing is, we've been talking about the updating district policies. Did Kathy get one of these slides?
Did I send you the policy listing? I sent you an email, just,
Yeah,
Good.
it just came through.
Yeah, and so I haven't had time to look at it. I did see it was there, but I literally saw that like in the last 15, 20 minutes.
so the handout, and I sent you this also, was the list of what they recommend we look at as priorities, in terms of, these are the ones that most districts have. And then within this, also, when I sent you that email too, with this, I identified what they say are probably the most important ones to first look at.
Oh,
Okay. So
Okay.
essentially our work would be going through this whole list in terms of how to make it manageable, but they suggested some that you really want to make sure you're current on, which is a handful, but some of those, even as I mentioned in my little email message, repeat themselves. So you could have, because of different employee groups, the same thing is going to repeat itself for or whatever.
Right.
So I think there's 14 in total, but you'll see some of them, are actually repeats, just in a different category. So what I would do is I will attempt to do, I'll send it out to you right away so that you have both our original and our revised. I mean, our original and what Neola suggests as a revision or options, or maybe it's just a brand new one that wasn't there before. But so I'll have an original if we had it. I'll have that, and then I will also review it with staff. To the extent if there are some immediate things that I would suggest to you how I'm looking at that, and then we'll open up that discussion too and start working through these.
So the only thing that I'm thinking is because there's quite a few policies there.
Right.
And I think that, that's going to be an entire meeting, I would think, right? Just to kind of go over every single one of those policies. Each one of
Well,
them
this is
they're
gonna take a year.
yeah, and they're gonna have to have two reads,
Right.
And so, there should be prioritization for, which policies move forward first. So I would suggest,
so
I'm gonna
these,
throw it out there, just possibly, should we even possibly look at a policy committee? Just for specifically that, because it is such a heavy lift. And because that it would allow deep dive.
Well, there's a couple of things to think about, and again, this almost comes back to the governance model. How do you want to take on governance?
Right.
In terms of where would policy review be? There's a couple ways to look at that. Policy relative to policies that might fit into a committee,
Mhm.
right? Or policies, from looking at it. So you could be thinking, and I think your past practice was assigning into committees.
Yeah,
That work, so again, I think this is worthy of conversation, to recognize in terms of what we have here and then how we want to proceed with it.
they suggest 14 policies
Yeah, but,
that we start with.
right.
My immediate thought, guys, is since it's 14, is that if Jim could forward that information on to us, and maybe as executive committee, we just go through it and see how it should be delved out into committees. There might be some that are loaded and some hardly any, and we can make that division as we can tackle it all as a whole board, but in our committee work first.
Right.
Yeah, I think like we could easily pump that out in an exec meeting about who should be doing it, or even Stacy could put it out to whichever committee she feels is necessary or would be best suited.
I guess one of the questions would be, our executive committee we're kind of running like a governance committee. So one of the questions would be, when we look at the next couple months, are those committees going to be needing to focus on other things such as, I'm thinking the big things with finance that are coming up.
Yep.
Now personnel, I think we could do some. But buildings and grounds, that's another one. I think, when we talk about needing to get structure of our buildings and where we're at, I don't know, finance is probably the biggest one, but I also don't know that I want to wait another month for
Mhm.
executive to come around for us to do anything with this.
So what are you thinking then?
We got a big.
I got a suggestion. Stacy, can you just take like 7 of them and just look at them and then see if you could divvy them up to the committees?
Yep.
And if the finance ones are heavy, maybe then run it through personnel or something. I mean, it's still gonna go to full board.
Right, it
but
will.
We have to start doing the work.
And it won't go to full board before the end of the year either.
Yeah, but we have to start the process.
So what if we do this? What if we get the original
Mhm.
and the suggestions?
And they've already been loaded up. I
Okay,
mean, so I have those, so those are
Okay.
just loaded up.
so,
And some of these things have gone through and we've made adjustments. They've recommended that we, don't trust because there could be an additional revision in there
okay,
that we, treat it as though we haven't looked at it yet. And
all right, well, so I guess if you guys are okay with me looking through them and taking the 14 and deciding what committees they should go to, let's just do that. And I'll get in contact with the chair to let them know which ones,
Which policies they can expect to see coming across their committee.
correct.
Okay.
I think that makes sense as far as getting the ball rolling
I'm
on
on
it.
board with that, yeah.
Okay,
Because it still might take the committee a month or two.
oh, yeah.
Well,
right,
yeah, I mean,
And
say,
if they don't finish it because they're busy, then they don't finish it.
right,
They have to do it, it stays on the agenda.
right. Yeah, good point. Okay. All right, well, that sounds good. So then that's
And
what we'll.
another
do.
option here too. I could work to send out all existing and suggested revisions to all boards, all board members, with only then paying attention to those that are assigned to you unless you wanted to review them all. Or I just stay with the committees and let them, Kathy's just stay with the committees and work it through. Otherwise, it's an overload.
Yeah, I think it kind of muddies the waters then too.
I do have a point of clarification. So like, when we have on here where it's 4122 and there's a 4122 and a 4122.02, is that in reference to, are they specifically saying 4122 unless the decimals are included, or is that?
My point is they highlighted only that one. I raised the same question, Colin. So when I'm going through this, I would be raising that same question and work back with Neola. Why aren't we including the subsection?
Right, yeah,
Right, because it seems like they're linked there. Now,
obviously.
they obviously might be picking out certain words or references. I don't know, but I had that question too,
Okay,
to
so that we're
know,
still waiting. for
because
an
I would
answer from?
assume,
Yeah.
so I'm working with Neola, so
Okay.
they went back and they're loading all this stuff again to go through a whole review process of all policies within a year.
Okay,
Yeah, I just want to clarify too. Is there any way you can combine, like, is there anything that, like, obviously you're having Neola look at the high risk ones, okay?
Right.
But are you able to look at them, or are you able to have somebody look at them before they go to the committee to see if any of them are overlapping?
Well, there will be some overlaps. That's in fact what I suggested, to the extent that,
They
as an
already
example,
tell us in here.
example 1422, and I did that. They had identified which
Oh.
ones, and I was just saying, to help you understand that you're doing work on one, it's going to stay the same through the others. As an example, under administration, you have non-discrimination and equal employment opportunity. That repeats itself under professional staff, non-discrimination, equal employment, and it also repeats itself under support staff. You see, it's the same law legislation, just impacting different subgroups of employees. And that's where I'm saying some of this work, there's 14 here, but some of it's really less than when you're figuring you're doing the heavy lifting, at the very beginning with one, and then it's just going to continue. You're gonna want to have the same thing apply to all groups.
Can we also get a matrix of these when the last rev was put forward, and have that also placed in that shared drive folder for future board reference too, so that we can have, we can begin that work on the,
When
You
it
know-
was last amended, you mean? Or
yeah,
what?
so like a
That typically is reference on policies, the last
but like
amendment
just
date,
have it, so like so on this, we have this.
to know how long it's been since you looked at it.
Exactly, yes, because I know there's some that have been like 7 years,
Yeah.
8 years. And really, even though maybe not needing,
Yep.
it should be it should at least be
Well,
visited to say, for
Context
example,
always helps, a little bit in terms of,
well, like there's one policy. It's use of social media. Social media's changed. MySpace doesn't. I don't even know if MySpace exists anymore. If it has it in there, obviously line that out and move on. And I don't know if that's in the but you know what I mean, right? So
yeah, well, that's in fact, it's always, they assume that was important because that's why they usually have the date of last revision on there. Just like when the law changes, they're always referencing the last time, so you could go back.
But when we're getting, so like, I like the fact that we have this big, the big list of policies, but I think maybe just have something where it's been revised so that we know, okay, well, we're maybe that's why we're visiting, or we're, you know what I mean? So.
Jim, I don't know if, was this a typo? 11662?
It could be.
Okay.
I flagged mine.
When I just look it over really quick too, I don't know if I'm looking at this correctly, but I don't think there's anything in the finance section that they're putting up right now.
Right.
When you look at the beginning numbers, that they're like, it starts with the 2 for the 2000s. There's no starting in the 6000s, which is for finances.
Right.
So given that there's a heavy load for the Budget and Finance Committee, that might be a plus.
Actually, and it's funny that you say that because I was just gonna say, these are all personnel.
Right. That's where you
Except
could have most problems as personnel
Yeah, except
from a
for,
legal standpoint.
except there would go two
Or
that would
students.
go to curriculum, which would be graduation requirements and student anti-harassment.
Mm.
So,
Well, and I know Angela is also, she has been considering some different processes to put forward. So we will have some that we're going to be tackling, because obviously then, when you're working on processes, those are going to need to be reflected in policy, right? So, or supported with policy. So obviously we are going to be doing some, but not some of the identified Neola policies then as well. So.
actually I take that back, Kathy. It's really personnel.
Right.
And curriculum committee, because there's all those in the 2000 are program ones that are related to students.
Yeah.
So maybe the other thing is we start with the 14 in those committees, and then maybe to give the other committees some, we'll just pick some of the other ones so that everyone's working on at least some of them.
There might be some that are just really easy to plow through too.
Right.
Let's hope so.
Okay, perfect. So then, so then I'll just go through these, and then pass them on to the chairs, and then we'll go from there.
Do we want to include behavior committee to review any of the items as well? Include that ad hoc committee on some of these?
We're not meeting until the end of January, so I think if time allows, we could have it as a discussion. It certainly would be actionable because we're an ad hoc committee.
Right, but
I could have, get advice from people, but if the timing works.
Okay.
But otherwise, it's not at all actionable, but it wouldn't be a bad conversation to include our teachers and so forth,
Okay.
if possible.
Okay. All right. Moving along here, new business, committee meetings, streaming options. So when at the last board meeting, Tony had made a statement about, he asked the technology team if our new technology in the boardroom would have streaming capability, and they said, well, we already do. So Tony's brought forth several times wanting to stream every committee meeting. And so I just wanted to run it by our committee, and yay, nay.
I like it. I mean, honestly, as far as like the streaming of, committee meetings. So, one of the things that we've heard on numerous times is that, dissatisfaction with consent agenda. Well, dissatisfaction with consent agenda is just the reason that we can't, with consent agenda, we can't place that out there is because it's all it is it's an approval of minutes in a chunk form, right? But you can't put out those minutes because they haven't been approved. So by allowing that streaming capability of all committee meetings, it adheres for that transparency that people desire. So if there
The
is,
the video would be out prior to the minutes being approved.
but right, I mean, if somebody says something, your reference point of, yeah, you said that, it's just, that's the way it is. You did say that, right? So and honestly, even there's been times where I've gone back and looked at things and I'm like, hey, yeah, actually, we did talk about that. And, or I can't attend a meeting. So I just like those, I like those options. I think streaming a committee meeting is great. Am I not catching what, the concern is? I mean, I don't know. I like the fact of being able to stream committee meetings.
I think my only concern is when we've done that in the past, if somebody, and somebody that is not school staff that has been there, we've had trouble because of the way that it has to be linked to
Oh, I see what you're saying.
YouTube.
So that is supposed to be solved with this new, in my understanding of it, the new boardroom upgrade will allow for an easier transition so that all it is just we stream and it's uploaded.
Right. Exactly. However, Tony wants it done now because we have the capability to do it now. So he's requesting that we start streaming everything now.
Okay.
If we do that though, everyone is going to, so the way I remember doing it and it didn't work, was Jessica has to be notified prior, and there has to be some other link or whatever to the chairperson, right, Lori? Yeah. And if that's not done, then the streaming is not going to load correctly and we're going to have the same complaints as we have before. So,
well, and that seems
I
almost
don't mind doing it either, but we have to make sure that, everybody that is going to be not chairing the meeting, that there's always either the chair knows how to do it or the district employee is there and knows how to do it. But I don't think we want to get into the habit of having someone from technology having to be here at every committee.
That's real hard on that department.
But I know, I
Yeah.
mean, so here's what we're talking about. We're talking about Angela, right?
Yeah.
We need to know how to do it because she's the one that sets up the meeting.
Mhm.
Chris would have to know how to do it because he's the one that sets up that meeting.
Well, what about a remote location? So say, I guess sometimes there's meetings that take place at a school. You're walking down a school. There would have to be
I don't think
an
we have
omission
that.
at that.
I don't think we have that capability.
Right.
If you're not in this.
Yeah, I
building.
would think,
So
certainly.
it has to be
Boardroom
stated
upgrade.
only this, that it's an understanding that it's only the committee meetings that are in here then,
Yeah, boardroom.
Yeah.
right?
It's the boardroom. So I think one of the things, and if I can just give my 2 cents from what I'm kind of understanding a little bit as well, and I may be not correct, but what we are going to try to do in the future, and this is something that I spoke with Jim about, is we're going to try to get all board meeting, I do the board meetings, but all the committee meetings have one person. It's going to be sent out or organized by the MPSD Board of Education account. That way there's no duplicates. If something gets changed, it's the most current. And I kind of was talking with Brady about that a little bit, and Jessica. They're talking a little bit about my wheelhouse with stuff like
Sure.
that. So But that's the plan, because I think moving forward with this new system that we're gonna be using, that's how it needs to be done.
Okay,
But
Okay.
Colin, like you're talking, if we're at another building,
Right.
we don't have all of this technology at that building. I don't know how we're going to live stream from another building.
Right.
And again, that's just my understanding, because it was the boardroom upgrade.
well, and the only way that, or the only committee that ever does something like that is really buildings and grounds, when you guys would meet other places.
Right,
Well, there's also and then also if we were to be at like Wilson, we've had general meetings at Wilson and so on
we
as
still live
well.
stream there.
We're
They-
still gonna be able to read
Well,
live stream?
Well, how they used to do that, they hauled all the
Right.
equipment over there.
Yeah.
they
Right, so if
set
we
up
had
and-
to-
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Well, that's good.
Okay, so coming full circle back, do we want to wait for the upgrade? Or do we ask technology, what's the best way, easiest way that we can start doing it with committee meetings now?
What is our timeline for that, Stacy, for the upgrade? Do we know?
I think they have the equipment, don't they?
I'm not certain. I know Brady's in here working, but I don't know if all the pieces are in play yet.
And there would be some things, whether or not we're gonna suspend things from ceilings or whether or not we're gonna put them on tables and stuff
Yeah.
like that. My sense is
Pretty quick?
pretty quick.
Okay. Well, then,
I would be inclined to wait till you get the equipment in, I think that's why it was prompted, because we
Okay.
saw the equipment was gonna help facilitate, it was gonna be easier to operate, particularly as Lori's indicated about how we better coordinate,
okay, so
you know,
let's, can you get us
I will.
just maybe a time frame
yep, in
so that
terms
we
of when
can
when we
communicate
yep, I
to the
will.
board and the public about when that we have the technology, but it would be best to wait to do it.
Well, and then, we'll, at the next meeting, we'll have that, the next meeting that we're gonna have is gonna be our
Next Tuesday?
next Tuesday. Yeah. So,
All right. Sounds good. Okay, and just other business, we had, the restructuring update. So Jim, is there any,
Just to, Jamie, as you know, even before she was on board and working, she also went to the site visit with SFA, which was really good, but she's already met with all my directors, and now, as we're moving through some transitions of who's reporting to who. So she's had another virtual meeting with them. She was introduced to them before when she was here. She had one-on-ones with everybody this week. Then she's having one-on-ones with all the principals, and she's almost through that. She's already scheduling time with elementary principals, secondary principals she's hitting the ground running. That's been really, really good.
Okay.
And I'm getting some real positive feedback, from that. So, that's just, I think really good. She'll be in, here next week and the week after, she caught something. So it was really great that she's actually virtually right now because it's not stopping her, but, as you talk, so that's just going well. And again, the whole thing is to try to wrap up I'm talking about central office, when I mentioned restructuring, even though we're always looking in terms of doing, to really understand what do we need to do to elevate our student achievement levels. And so that will involve other things, but, at the moment, it is just how am I going to work? And I'm really working to move more resources as close to the classroom as I can. I mean, that's my ultimate goal, is to reinforce.
have there been any decisions about, what schools are gonna be getting some of those resources yet? Have you, no decisions yet?
No, that's, some of this now is bringing Jamie up,
Up to speed, and that's kind of where we're
really,
at.
that's pretty quick.
Okay.
Right.
And then when do you anticipate, some of those next steps to be?
Well,
starting to
January
take
was
place?
what I was, always targeted. I just really felt when I started looking at some things, the importance of having this new position on board to help lead some of this transformation.
Okay,
Otherwise I would have waited for everything for January. That's created a little unrest because, people are scared because they don't know what that means. Does that mean I have a job? This is about having more resource, not less. Okay. But it is in terms of from a central office point of view, what is it that I feel that I need, to meet your expectations,
Right.
of what you see needing to take place in the school district.
And we're probably pretty much just, I mean, it sounds like it's just, from my understanding, it sounds like it's just a direction of central office coming in for support to those schools. It doesn't sound like it's, much of an overhaul, I guess you could say. It's kind of more or less, we're going to be here and we're going to be here and we're going to be just supporting and trying to get the performance
A
up.
lot of it is, I'll keep going back to it. What's our primary goal? Student achievement, behavior, and how do we support teachers in the classroom?
Yeah.
With everything that we feel is critically important, including curriculum, which is a major component. And, we discussed that a lot in terms of that's where it was already in motion, before, with an English language arts, recognizing that there was importance to change the math, which we did. And, this is ramping things up a little bit, but, so it's just making sure that we really continue to make sure that those resources get to where they need to be, and that's in the classroom with students and teachers.
So,
Okay, and then the last thing on there is the SFA.
Right. So that I think is really opening up where more people are learning more. Today we should have stuff on the website. Now, where we've been attempting to do that. There was some challenges, in terms of believing that there's some limitations on. There's a lot of people, including in-house, that really want to redo our webpage. Okay,
Right.
So we will be moving that direction. But I involved Lisa Stink. She's working with some of our people. We've got some people changing, so it's also timing's perfect for that. And so we are now putting a lot of the information on SFA that we've already had out the 2 school sites. Now will be on the web. So
Okay.
we're going to create high visibility, high transparency, with that. The other thing that was, with the SFA that's really important was, there's one thing about telling something about something, there's another thing about seeing it, and if you stop to think about what we did in a short period of time, we had 2 back-to-back virtual meetings with over 100 participants. Even though not everybody's seeing those, they were behind the scenes and they're raising questions. We answered a lot of those questions. We're still looking for, where some have to go a little deeper. Some are just going to be decisions we make along the road if we go with, the success route.
who are those meetings with? Like, is that,
Well, we
is it
had
staff
the
that's
one with
attending
the
those?
two pilots.
Oh, gotcha,
That we
okay,
were
yeah.
originally starting with. Remember, I was saying, I'm comfortable that we've been working to move in the right direction. However, I felt it would be really good to see and compare and contrast how does our efforts compare with a national model that's proven successful. And through this process now with all the questioning, there's actually more interest to think about whether or not we need to expand those sites now. So it's actually moved a lot faster than I ever imagined it might relative to what we might learn. But really what's important now is I've had 9 teachers go visit an SFA site, 2 principals, and Jamie. And so now I see their position to actually evaluate with additional assistance and get a recommendation from Jamie and kind of this newly formed instructional team in terms of should we consider SFA, which appears to be the chosen model, if we are looking at a model, to additional sites. And so, in fact, even wanting to take advantage of any time, I knew Lance was going to be here, just because I wasn't there, but just even hear from Lance, if you wouldn't mind,
Yeah.
in terms of some of your takeaways, Lance, and what you gained from that involvement with your own staff.
Sure.
Yeah, come on up. Jamie would have been here, but she had another commitment. I mean, virtually, she would have shared her own.
So,
Hi, Lance.
hi.
Lance?
First of all, just on behalf of the staff and students of Washington, I just want to thank all of our board members for your service and leadership in the community. So we appreciate you. And in addition, wanted to thank you and Mr. File for the support in sending us to do the site visit. It was certainly an enlightening experience. Kind of brought us together as a team, and we learned a lot. So
Can you tell us who was on your team that came with you to the middle school?
yeah, so we had one of our EL teachers, Amanda Saraki,
Okay.
was there. One of our reading specialists, Angela Sharp, went on that trip. One of our social studies teachers, Sandy Kalachka, and two of our 8th grade English teachers, Caitlin Loberger and Allie Lusk. So it was a great team. And I'll just speak, briefly to a few of our takeaways.
Yeah.
So one of the things that it's important to know, we visited, and I've said this to our staff as we've had conversations since we've been back. We visited a school district that serves a community that has struggled with some economic depression through loss of manufacturing. And there's some similarities in that district to ours, probably a bigger community than Manitowoc. But we did see some of those similarities, which I think is part of the reason why Mr. File sent us to that particular site. Some of the things that we saw will seem very familiar to some things that we're already doing. It's probably more of a structured system.
Okay.
So a couple of those things are, it's a whole school system and it produces active student engagement. So I've been saying to our staff, we walked in there and I thought I would see students off task, maybe managing, it's a middle school, so maybe managing some behaviors and things, and quite pleasantly surprised that the classrooms we visited students were actively engaged in the literacy component. We visited some elective classes, actively engaged as teams in those classes, a math class, same thing. And one of the things we noticed was that the students could expect a similar format class to class. So we felt, when we talked to the teachers, we felt like, okay, well, this is part of like that predictability that helps to produce that active engagement. Another thing we saw, again, familiar to us, would be students working in cooperative teams. Again, across the curriculum, so 3 to 5 students. And one of the things that also surprised me, teacher talk during the classroom visits was minimal. It was the students working together around specific goals. Students are earning, collectively they're earning points. They call them celebration points, but it kind of tracks their progress in the goals of the class. Another thing we saw that was, again, familiar, every class was organized around a very specific learning target. So the activities of the class would, there's rotations. They'd rotate through several different activities, but specific to that one learning target for the class, which is embedded in the scope and sequence of at least of the literacy program.
Okay.
The other thing, again, also familiar that we would see is some very specific anchor charts. So these are, I don't know if that's maybe it's an education term, but it's these are posters that would just highlight the specific skills and strategies that students are attempting to do.
Oh, sure.
Okay. And so if I'm not quite sure what I'm supposed to do, I might look up on, okay, there's my anchor chart, tells me, okay, now I can get back to it. All right. So that was also a very, very similar thing. The other thing, probably different than what we saw in the classrooms, they spent some time walking us through this, was a school-wide organization system. And so that's, we would call it distributive leadership. So every teacher was on one of these teams. And and we have that that's a familiar thing, but I think this is, again, an organized structure. Every one of those teams was goal-oriented. So every teacher would be on at least one team. Some teachers run multiple teams, but the teams were focused on a very specific part of school improvement, but then also within that had their own monthly goals that they were achieving. So for example, there was I don't think the Success for All program calls it this, but it was a PR team. I think they call it Community Connections on the website. So they call it PR team. So their goal was 90% of our teachers will share an image or a message from their classroom on social media this month. So then they achieved that goal, though they meet together at the end of the month and they set a new goal. Maybe it's 95, maybe it's 100%. So so some of those teams, there's an attendance team. So that might be our attendance rate is 90%. We want to increase that by 1% this month. What are some of the strategies we're going to do? How are we going to work together as an attendance team? Family engagement teams. There's an intervention team. There's sort of like they call it the PBIS. I think maybe people are familiar with that, but it's a behavior system so there's a team specific to that. Overall, there's a team called the School Solutions, which is a representative of all of those distributed leadership teams. So when I talked to the principal of Harding Middle School, one of the things he said was, the nice thing is the team set the goal. They just let me know what the goal is, and then I try to get out of their way and let them work, support them. So, and as we talk with individual staff members about what teams do and things, that was a consistent thing that they, there was that extra investment. But again, it was targeted, it was structured, and it was very goal oriented. So those are just kind of like 5 takeaways that we, our team kind of created that list. We thought those were the things we saw. The thing I would also say is we also identified some challenges, that, a school like ours would face in adopting this type of system. And, we feel that there's we saw enough flexibility in the conversations we've had that we need to have the freedom to be able to address those challenges, but it's there in this system.
This system has that ability to pivot off the block if there's an obstacle. Okay, great.
Yeah. And there's in talking with, it was great to have Jamie there because we were able to get to know her a little bit, but also to kind of see her perspective on that. She's got her own analysis of it. Yeah. Any specific questions?
Have you noticed anything that they do differently than we're doing right now currently?
Yeah. Could
you explain some of them?
Yeah. I think the structure that they have in the lesson delivery, some people refer to it as a scripted program. We didn't see anyone walking around with a script. And I actually asked to go off their kind of schedule. So, show us a teacher who's new to it this year. So they took us to that, even though they hadn't planned to. So we got to see that. Even that teacher is not carrying around the script, following the same format. I was trying to think we could have a longer conversation I could give you, but here's maybe some examples of what we saw. The structure of the lesson might be the teacher gives a mini lesson, which is like something we would do, but then the student teams are tasked to work through a reading passage and provide a written response together. Now, the thing that kind of surprised me was when it was time to share the group, from that group, a random student would be called on. They had to represent. It wasn't just like,
like the same
pick Stacy
leader.
because she's the leader. No, it was like the teacher's going to randomly pick someone. Across the board, every time, whoever she called on had the message from their team. That was part of the routine. So they'd give their answer. Then the other teams in the class would randomly be called on to say, how do you score that answer? So they had to be actively engaged in listening to what that team had produced. And then this was the incredible thing. They would say things I just wouldn't expect 12-year-old to be able to say. I'd give it 100, for example, because it was clear and correct. It used specific examples and explanations, and it had academic language. And the teacher could say, okay, what academic language was in it? And the students that were listening were able to say, this is what we identified as academic language, and that's why we gave it on.
And you're saying you're seeing this more throughout the whole scope of your visit, instead of compartmentalized in certain classrooms. It was an overall arch of cooperative learning and then discussion amongst the curriculum and
Even
any
in,
subject.
even in an elective, would you say?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. I don't think we saw the same like groups evaluating each other. So like one of the electives we visited was a robotics class, working on different types of projects.
okay,
But that same collaborative, so you could walk up to the group and say, tell us what you're learning here. They had their own specific like goal, what they were
Okay.
we're trying to get this robot to climb the stairs, keep stopping on the second stair. And we got to reprogram it, those kind of things.
So you could you could easily see an overall arch of that structure being implemented in different phases
Mhm.
because of we'll call it redundancy, but it's the training of understanding to be a critical thinker, to have that discussion and then to peer evaluate too. You're saying they did a very good job of cohesively bringing that together compared to maybe it not happening as much in our district right now? Or just, is there that kind of, are you seeing it being a center and, brought together very good there? And you're saying we have gaps in that, or we don't have that much out here at all?
Yeah, I'll just be careful about saying what we have or don't have, because I can
Okay.
speak to Washington, but what I saw there was a program that's consistent, like the students could predict what they're gonna, they were used to it. In fact, we talked to some of the students who said,
One of my experiences at Urban Day was we had such high teacher turnover. The students were teaching the teacher
Oh, wow.
how the
Oh, because
arrangement
they-
Because the
is.
continuity in the
Because the
message.
consistency, they were so into the routines. That it was amazing because we would also evaluate, and get teacher survey, and students would score higher about knowing SFA even than the teachers did because they had been working with it. So it was really interesting. And then the other thing is there's a lot of celebration in this program. And so when the points, they're breaking up in teams, but these teams are competing against each other. They want their team to win. So they're coaching their group, who's going to represent us, who might get called, making sure they're really prepared. I mean, they really leverage the cooperative learning, which there's a lot of research. That's why we're using it here already. I mean, this is like, it's not new, but it's definitely part of a system. There's consistency. And I think that's exactly what Lance was experiencing. And I was hoping that that's what they would come away with because that was my experience. I've never been there. I'm just aware of their reputation and how many people go there, to check out the system.
Lance, so as far as the, I guess I have two questions too, is just like, do you feel that this is something that would benefit our district by adding a process to our district that would be having that clear expectation for our children?
Yeah, I think it's a worthwhile system that we should be exploring. I think, I think it's probably going to be for Jamie and Jim to make that decision.
Sure,
And ultimately the board. But it was an impressive system that, like I said, I think you could tell I'm impressed.
I would also say, they're also looking though in terms of really examining this in terms of what's missing. One thing that they came back was the writing component wasn't as strong as they like.
Yeah, so just to speak to that, like one of my questions at the end of the day to the principal was, tell us about the worst part of your system.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then the three worst parts.
right.
And that being the writing system.
That's
was
what he
one of them.
talked about, was
So-
they have to supplement this with a different writing system. What they're using probably isn't the curriculum, but it's something that works for them. Now, I will say that we talked about it as a team. We want to explore, because the writing component is actually built into the literacy component. So there are some things in there, but that's one of the things they told us. You got to look at writing. We also have a different English learner population than they do, and those are some things we have to explore and learn about. The other thing I would just add to it too is, we talked with those students. One of the things they said was, yeah, we did this at the elementary schools. This group of 4 students came from 4 different schools.
Mm.
Okay, so they knew the system coming into the middle school, and that's one of our things as a list of a challenge. We'll have, if this is approved by the board and Washington is starting this next year, we'll have 6th graders coming in. This is brand new.
Mhm.
That's going to be a challenge, not a challenge that we can't overcome, but it's different. So that's one of the things I've been saying to our teachers is, I promise you, it's not going to be perfect when we start it, but that would be true of probably.
Did they, and then Kathy, I'll grab you. Did they start it in all of their elementary schools and then later move to the middle school so that everybody knew, or did they do it kind of like what we're talking about in elementary and then a middle?
Yeah, I understand your question. I think the other thing I've been mentioning to our staff is, we saw their version of Success for All.
Right.
We're going to create our version of it. We're not just replicating something from Ohio. It's going to be based on our priorities as a staff and as a community. So the way I don't have all the details, but the way I understand it is that about 20 years ago, their elementary started using Success for All. Their district made a decision at some point that 5th grade was coming to the middle school. So their middle school is 5, 6, 7, 8. So those 5th graders that came had kindergarten or preschool through 4th grade in the Success for All program. And at that point, the middle school adopted it with
Okay.
students. So does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yep.
But I think, again, that's all
I'm gonna grab Kathy first. Kathy?
I'm cautioning myself about what I'm going to say here, but I was fortunate enough to have one of the people who went to Ohio reach out to me, and we had a lengthy discussion. And I'll be honest, I got to have 24 hours back in Manitowoc, so I was very nervous about meeting with this person and what she would have to say about it. And especially because she wanted to meet in person, she didn't want to do it in a phone call. And I was really pleasantly surprised that, so this was the Franklin team, and that she said, she went into open-minded, others maybe not as much so, but one of the things that they came out very excited, they thought every single classroom in the elementary. So when they knew that they were going to go see some of the classrooms, one of the skepticism is, oh, sure, you're going to show us your best rooms, right? Or the people who've been prepped, they know we're coming. But she said they literally saw every single classroom. And she said, I looked intentionally and everybody was engaged, and they were very impressed by that. So I was very excited and relieved to hear that. So it sounds like there was a very positive coming out of it. There was a lot of positivity coming out of it. And so I was encouraged by that. There are some questions that were raised, I think, during our discussion, which I think should be thought of. And hopefully I'm okay raising that here. But one of the questions was, if we have, like, for example, Washington has 3 feeder schools, 3 feeder elementaries. What do we do with those kids then who come from Franklin, and then the others haven't afforded the same opportunity and then gone into Washington? So I think that's an interesting thing to think about. And I'm not necessarily advocating each. I think we have to really think about that hard. And then the other thing that was pointed out was Washington may not have the immediate turnaround we'd like to see, just because they haven't had, we're not capturing those first, second, and third graders with the heavy reading. They're halfway through their school. So it's no matter what, I think it's going to help. But that's just one of the things that I think we should be aware of moving forward. That is, if we do adopt SFA, we should not expect, it would be great if we can, but if we should not expect the same numbers coming out of Washington, at least in the first year or two, as we would see in our elementary. So those are just some of the points that we had talked about. But I felt really positive after I had talked to this person. And it wasn't just her take, it was the entire team. So, and I wanted to share that because I think publicly everyone needs to know that they didn't just see those couple rooms, they saw every single one of them.
I'm gonna try to distill this, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm trying to distill the what you just presented. What I'm hearing is, I like to say the word scientific method, but I'm gonna say the word learning method. The learning method of the classrooms is consistent throughout the school. However, it does provide the freedom for the individual educator to still teach their own way they'd like to present the information. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah.
Okay.
From what we saw.
Yeah,
You know, they were
that's-
there for a day, but
But the arching, we'll call it, so like I like to say, like, because I remember the scientific method, like we're all kind of, all the educators are trying to use the same process to get, so like, I don't want to knock it saying that it's canned, it's not canned, but the process is no different than if you're trying to solve a problem. I'll call it the learning method, but the process of how you solve an issue is the overall arching idea, and that's consistent from classroom to classroom, subject to subject, but it still provides the educator to be the individual to tweak it to however they'd like to present the content. That's what I'm hearing.
Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
yeah, I think there's some consistency in the structure, but there's also freedom in the way the teacher, presents the content.
It's not canned by no means, is it?
I would say we'd have to define what you mean by canned, but I mean,
You said script.
I've used a
Well,
canned program before where I'm following like teacher says and I read it, and student respond, and they respond. That's not what this is.
What it is, SFA would, in clarification of when that is referenced, and that's referenced a lot, in terms of scripted, it's a highly detailed lesson plan.
Okay, yep. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yep, Colin.
Did they touch on any struggles of initial implementation? Did you get to hear from obviously SFA isn't talked about probably in college as much. So, sometimes a lot of the teachers and sometimes people from outside of the community, they might have been raised and learned different things as well. So they're under a different idea and concept of how schools processes work. Did they touch on how the struggles that they might have had in rallying around this, getting into this? Did anybody touch on that you could have?
Yeah, so I would say a couple things about that. One, it was 10 years ago, and so they have to kind of think back to, to try to remember it. But one of the things that, like one of our things we'll have to figure out is what do we need to do with our schedule to make this work?
Yeah.
So I wanted to did some time with the principal to talk about the schedule and things. One of the things he said was, we had 4 different schedules each of the 4 years. First 4 years, shared those schedules with me, so I could, hopefully not just repeat them, the things that didn't work, but
Learn.
but so like they had to work through things. So for example, the first year they had 90 minutes, every teacher, all teaching literacy all at the same time. They said that doesn't work for middle school. So they went to a different system. That didn't work. They went to it just gradually got better and better, which again tells me there's a flexibility within the program, which is what the people we've contacted at the Success for All Foundation, that's what they've said too. We've got flexibility. We'll have someone meet with you and help you determine the best schedule to implement this, which kind of goes to the second point. And it's something we have to explore further and be able to communicate and articulate. And that is the support system that's in place in implementing this. So they bring, this is what we learned. So 10 years later, they're still getting a coach to come to their school quarterly and audit them, provide feedback. Here's some things you could be doing better. What do you do with that? So I asked, what do you do with that information now, 10 years in? Well, we apply it to whatever their recommendation is, and the teacher team takes a look at it, sets a goal for how we're going to improve it. Again, because that's part of the overall system. So what we want to know is, what are those supports that are going to be in place for staff that might be new to this, like you're talking about? So, which will be everyone.
Yeah.
We talk about like, what can we do now? Let's say if after the decision is made in January, what can we do to start getting ready? So we want more information about, what's available and what's that going to be for, to support our staff. So that.
It does, and I appreciate that because obviously if say we were to move forward with this, knowing and being aware of those struggles is going to be beneficial because that way then you can know, okay, well, we're going to have to work through this and figure this out and go beyond. And then I guess one last question. I'm stealing a lot here, so thank you. I appreciate the insight. Was the teaching team, did they enjoy having this process? Did they versus not, I guess you could say. I mean, some of them might not have always had it. So did they appreciate them? Did they like the process?
So if I understand your question, you're asking about the teachers at Harding Middle School.
Yeah, how did they feel about that? Did they like what the way that things were being?
Yeah. I think he gave us a mix of people, but he also gave us people that were going to be able to, tell us about how the program worked. We didn't talk to anyone that said this program is garbage, you shouldn't do it.
Oh,
Okay. That wasn't, and I did ask him, like, somewhere in this building, there's got to be someone who's reluctant, but by and large, it's when you see the system work, this is what they told us. When you see the system work, that creates the, buy-in.
energy drives energy. Yeah.
But so there wasn't that kind of dissonance that we saw, but we did talk to like one of their facilitators, which is a position in a school that has Success for All. One of their facilitators had worked in the district early on, had left, and was now back as a facilitator. And she had worked in a district that used some of the same curriculum that we use here, and she, so she was able to talk about the comparison and contrast, and she chose to come back. So she thinks this is a good system. So, but there were some different insights there.
Interesting.
Many things are built in as we discussed, including the character education component. You talked about how kids were engaged, in terms of active. What did you see with behavior there at a middle school?
Kathy talked about her conversation with the team that went to the elementary, but it was the same. Like we thought, we're going to middle school. It was a big school. We couldn't go to every classroom like they did, but we went off their plan because we wanted to see some different things.
Yeah.
And spend some more time, see a whole lesson and things like that. I think the way I put it was, I just kept thinking, as we go into some of these other classrooms, I'll see a student, having an off-task conversation, and just because that's, been my experience working in middle schools. And in one classroom, with a teacher that was new to Success for All, I thought I saw it. So I walked over to the group and was listening. No, it wasn't. They're talking about the book, in their group. So
That's funny. That's funny that you say that because I went into I was in an elementary classroom yesterday, and never really being there. And there's one teacher, and I can't remember how many kids were in that particular classroom, but they were working in groups like that. And I thought, geez, this just looks like no one's doing anything, right? But then I sat with two of the girls that were kind of getting their stuff out, you know, and they were, you know, doing this activity, but very similar to that. I mean, they are talking about the, project that they're working on, you know,
There's a
so.
lot of research on collaborative learning, about
Yeah.
how beneficial that is.
And just kind of going back to Matt's original question,
Mhm.
just want some of the difference thing I want, if I could, just to add, because I think you kind of reminded me of that. There's a difference when you're in a cooperative learning team and it's real clear that one person may be more advanced than another, you know, and then you defer to the, you know, the person
Right.
who's getting it a little bit
Mhm.
quicker. And I think that's a difference that, you know, frankly, you know, I'm nervous about, you know, because it's not what we've done here. And but when we talk to those students, they're in classrooms in the literacy and even in across the curriculum, at least within the classroom, they're in groups that are based on their ability. So when we started talking to teachers and students, that's what we said was there's no reason that any one person in that group couldn't be called on, because there's no natural, like, you know, Stacy's always got the right answer, so I defer to her. It's everyone's at their same level. And so the implication, so here's something that I think would be important for us to consider. The implication of that is that they have a program there after having done this a number of years called the Scholars Program. So we visited one of those classrooms. These are fifth graders. They weren't just randomly selected or took a test and scored high into this group. They completed the fifth grade literacy program in fourth grade. And so they were ready for a sixth grade curriculum. And that's how this literacy program is set up. So these are fifth graders doing the sixth grade curriculum.
Okay.
So they were at their level and they were ready to move up. So they did. And I think
And I think that's kind of a critical point
Yes.
here, because this is not only about the catch-up growth, which is going to be so important to us. It's advancing kids. It's advancing them to the next level. You know, so it's really serving all kids.
Mhm.
You know, and with that acceleration in mind.
I also wonder, it'd be neat if they would have taken any, it just seems like kids would be more confident. And sort of tending to have some natural leadership roles if you are all participating in that way, prepared to be able to engage like that.
Yeah, and I think you highlighted something that we saw. You know, the students were confident. There were some, you know, everyone has their own personality. So we saw some students that were shy, that were called on randomly to represent their group.
The
And
random reporter, they call it, because you don't know
Yeah,
who's going
that's
to
a
get
random.
called, you know, because nobody hides in success for all, but the system's built to support all. And then I think that reflects itself in terms of what Lance is sharing with us.
Yeah, so anyone could confidently represent their group and did. And used the language of, you know, the academic language, the explanation, like all of the skills we want them to know and be able to do in any school anywhere.
Right.
But that's just how they operate with confidence at their level.
The other thing just to know is that, so next Tuesday, the leadership teams, representatives from the leadership team, as many as we can get here, will be here to do a presentation about that site visit.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be before the
Well,
board meeting.
that's at the board meeting, but
Okay.
we will also be doing an overview, an hour overview with parents. You know, so one of our first, and you'll have both Franklin Elementary or any school for that matter. You know, we're promoting this to try to increase the exposure and to, you know, provide this overview so that we again try to, you know, real transparency, you know, trying to get more people to understand what this might offer us.
And that
so
was,
the
and that
board-
was an email that went out to everybody
Yep.
today, right?
Yep.
All families and, okay.
supposed to.
I got it.
You got it? So
I'm a
yeah,
parent.
yep, there you go. So again, we're really ratcheting this up now. It's been, a lot of people have just really went out of their way to help elevate this understanding and to share.
Okay.
But again, as you mentioned, this is not looking for something how to sell it. It's about understanding it, including its limitations. And as you would hear from Jamie, nothing's perfect. And so the more you know, the more you're going to be equipped, to succeed.
Have you begun, even within your own school, have you begun, outreach to the teachers just to kind of, helping them learn and understand about this as well? Has there been any of that? And I guess obviously, you probably have met with many people on this already. Has that started to take place, those discussions on, yeah?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, our team went, and then they're part of other teams in our building.
Mhm.
So those conversations happened. So we got back on Thursday. On Friday, we just made a point of every one of our teacher teams has someone from our group of 6 at their team meeting on Friday, so we could answer questions and talk about it. And then we also Thursday we shared in our regular staff newsletter. We shared some of the things I just shared with you. And then furthermore, our team got together on Monday and we planned. Some of the things started happening a little bit faster, but we planned to have a staff meeting where we would share more detail.
And I, just to add, I know Franklin had their staff meeting today after school, and the team talked about what they saw as well.
Ours will be next week.
Lance, how would you rate this, or how would you identify this? Would you identify this as a state-of-the-art research-based, learning curriculum? And some have suggested, this is old,
Mhm.
That it's like not current, it's not research-based, it's not evidence. How would you look at that now based on your years of experience and what you also understand and what you just seen? Obviously, you're seeing some of the same things we see with research, but just to kind of
some of the things that just so you guys are aware, and some of the information that we shared in that email that went out to everyone is some of the research behind it. So if people can look for themselves, because people like to do their own research and read it for themselves. And I don't think that I don't see any argument with the idea that it's an older system, and that the research that has supported it was done 20 years ago. But I think that we also shared some more current stuff, that it's like in 2015, the Every Child Succeeds Act did an analysis of different programs. So that's some newer stuff that we can look at. From my years of experience in education, I would say that I've seen there's some cycles that happen. And I think when we start, science of reading is a cycle that we're hearing a lot about in media. That if we were to go back 20-25 years, we heard about it back in the early 2000s as well. And so it's, for me, I think about it more in practical terms as opposed to trying to rate a system or say it's old. Like, is it going to help students be able to learn to read and then be able to read to learn? And if we can start to see those things happening, then it's, we can call it a science of reading, we can call it whatever we want to call it, but we're starting to see results and start to see students learn. And that's what we saw with students. They're learning the skills we want at our school. They're learning the skills that they want at their school. And again, some kids are moving at a faster rate. We're catching kids up that are behind. So, as far as state of the art, I don't know if I'm the person to answer that, but I know that, like, for practicality reasons, like seeing seeing like 11-year-olds, 12-year-olds accomplish the things that we saw them accomplish was impressive. And we want that here.
So we're hearing from you, and there was a number of other professionals that went on this trip as well. Was it a pretty shared universal consensus? Thank you. On what they saw there, or was there differing? You know, were there some people that are like, "Yeah, this is awesome," and some like, you know, still don't know. I mean, how was the group in this?
I think, like Kathy said it, you know, it was across the board positive.
Yeah.
But I don't want to paint a picture that there's that this, like, we're doing a sales, you know.
I know, and that's why I'm asking.
We
So,
understand. We were looking for what's not there.
Right, and there are, I mean, I talked to a group of Franklin teachers that didn't go yesterday. And they already know what some of the limitations are.
Mhm.
So, you know, I think to one of your points, right, is, you know, and I think a lot of people would say there is no perfect curriculum out there. And this is more than a curriculum, right? The other thing is I remember talking to a teacher, and as she was describing just what she does in her room, I said, and what little I know about SFA, I'm like, that sounds like SFA to me. I think you're going to like it, right? Because, but now she definitely knows that she's doing something different than other teachers are, you know, across the school, right? So I think that's the other thing to remember is there are a lot of components that we are already doing that aren't going to be a stretch for teachers. I think a lot of it is the structure, is the consistency, and also you know, having the students learn something in a different way too. But yeah, so I mean,
Yeah, for me, I think you're bringing up a really key point, that we're going to recognize what we're doing in some of this,
Mhm.
and then we're going to learn some new things. And, you know, we've talked about it, how like there's kind of that Venn diagram. We think about those two circles, that like there's some things that are new, there's some things that we're doing now that aren't part of this, but there's also a big oval in the middle that you know, where there's overlap.
Right.
And I think those are the kind of things that, as you start to see those, as we started to see those, that are reassuring
Mhm.
when you learn about it. If
Right.
you don't know about it, you don't know what those are, so there's
Yeah.
a little bit of apprehension. You know,
I just want to say, guys, I'm really looking forward to Tuesday and the presentation. But Lance, I'm gonna ask you, and hopefully Matt will be the same, as don't tell us what we want to hear. Tell us what your real takeaways are when you present this to the board on Tuesday. I think that's really important to put out there, and maybe even say it ahead of time. You know, I don't want fluff. I don't want to hear, you know, just because you think it's what I want to hear. I want to hear what you really, really think about it. So that's what I'm hoping for the presentation for everyone on Tuesday.
well, I hope you don't think this has been fun.
Not at all.
I'm telling you what.
No, I'm not
we
saying
just
that.
want you to know that we're ready to hear the ugly things too.
Yeah, I don't
when
want to
they
open my
come up.
wallet again.
Right.
Well, and because this shouldn't be just a sales pitch. We really want to know what you guys think and what you saw and heard. And I know that's what you're expressing now,
Mhm.
but I'm just saying on Tuesday is a big presentation to the whole board, and there'll be a lot more people watching.
Mhm.
And I think it's just really important that, you know, I think people need to understand too, as board members, at least for me personally, I can't speak about the rest of you, but I want to know the real stuff. Because we don't know how to tackle anything unless we hear what people really think and what people really saw. And so I'm looking forward to that, because I guess I'm really hopeful that this is positive, but that doesn't mean everything is. So.
And well, to that point, I'll tell you, as we met on Wednesday night and talked about what our takeaways were and what we would share, one of the things that we made a commitment is we're not interested in coming back to Manitowoc and sugarcoating anything.
Good.
Like there's some things that have to be decided that are going to be really important, whether this works or not. And so there's not going to be, like, I don't think anyone on our team is going to hold back and without saying those things, And
Okay.
frankly, I'm saying some of those things to you today, like, like you brought up the point about the feeder schools to Washington. That's right.
And I did
It's
talk to,
it's not the way
I
the
had,
system's set up.
I had a chance to talk to Matt, just a little bit, yesterday. And again, I think this expedition was to get more information, real information about is it applicable to, this environment? And if it's not, well, then
Can we find something?
we find something else.
Yep.
So, so I think you're right on, Kathy, that, the more information that we have as a board and as a district to make a decision, that's great. And I think you're right too, that, I, in sitting and talking with some teachers too, I think one of the biggest challenges is the schedule, right? And looking at, and creating.
Because you're trying to get a lot in.
Right. Creating a different kind of structure than that we're currently using. So almost like the person that whoever is going to take the facilitator positions, that's going to be
Key position.
that's going to be key position. Yeah.
The other thing we haven't surfaced was they're a big choice school. Am I correct?
Steubenville, Ohio. So we would call it school choice. I think they call it open enrollment.
Right.
But there's 4 school districts around their district, and those students can choose to come there, or their students can choose to go there. So they have a pretty aggressive. I don't know if this specifically applies to Success for All, but they have a pretty aggressive approach to getting students from other districts to come to their school.
Oh.
For example, they're the only they offer preschool. And so a lot of the students will come for preschool. There's a preschool part of
And SFA
Yes.
preschool.
Yes, and so
And again, it feeds into the system, which is again,
Yes.
you're leveraging again consistency, early age.
Yep. And you feed into the system, and a lot of the families will stay, even though they live in a different district, because they.
Even
That's
my
right.
experience at Urban Day, we had a Head Start program. We got the feds to agree for us to use the SFA curriculum. All this was to create leverage, and the importance of that preschool. Where we want kids starting school ready to start. So it was really pivotal. What was pivotal that we had the opportunity to be able to alter the curriculum to use SFA versus the Head Start protocols.
Yeah. The other trick that they used was, so they have because they start at 5th grade. So they have an open house for any 4th graders to come in, and they always schedule it on a day when there's no school in those other districts.
Oh.
So that, it's sort of like, if you have to work, your kid can go to
School today. Thanks.
and even to the point of, so it's right on the border between Ohio and West Virginia. So there's actually families that pay tuition because they're out of state, that pay tuition to come to their schools from West Virginia. So, like I said, they're very aggressive about reaching out and making sure that open enrollment is in as opposed to.
Yeah, that was another point that was brought up that you brought up just now, Lance, is about the kind of like the pre-K type stuff. Just capturing our kids even younger so that they get that stability in reading in right away. And that's a real need in our community when you have low income people who say want to work and could use that almost as I hate to call it daycare because we're not daycare, but I mean, who, you know what I mean? Instead of having to pay someone to watch their kids, they actually come and get educated. So there are a lot of thoughts that we can put into this and ways to look at it and what the future might hold.
Well, thank you so much,
Yeah,
Lance, for
thanks,
coming
Thank
up.
you.
I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah, thanks, Lance.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else, that is all our agenda. I'll take a first and a second to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, Kathy.
Yeah, great. Thanks, you guys.
Bye, Kathy.
Thanks, Paul.